So we thought we'd do a different version of the gait assessment here on a treadmill to show how everyone has a different thought process and how we use the tool differently. When I like to do a gait assessment, the first thing I do is I simply like to just watch the patient run for a minute and get a sense of if anything jumps out at me. The second thing I like to do, as Dave demonstrated, is I'll use the bullseye to get a basic sense of how much she may or may not be bouncing around. But one of the tools I use that Dave didn't happen to mention is the measurement tool, and I like to use this quite a bit so that I can get right at the step length. So we sort of at heel strike and toe off, and I can come right in and just drag that to an estimated point on her heel and on her toe, and get a sense of that being the distance. And now progress her forward to the next heel strike toe off type position. I can get a sense of whether those are comparable. And again, it's an eyeball, but it gives me a sense of whether she's taking a symmetrical step length, and a quick way for me to eyeball it to know if it's close or not. The second thing I like to look at from this side, simply the recovery phase. And so if we watch this left leg as it comes back through, there's quite a bit of distance here that she has to recover that leg and ultimately get that leg to pull through. So as we watch, she pulls that leg through. So I think there's a little, again, the speed may not be appropriate, but there's a little bit of a lag with hip extension. And again, there's a lot of recovery that has to happen on this back leg. So but we're going to potentially make some suggestions as she runs, is we might be working on some skip drills to encourage a little bit of hip extension and movement patterns. So let's look at her running from behind. Again, if we just look at the gross movement for a minute, and I think Dave did a great job of showing that left hip is bouncing around. What's really important to me here is there's a lot of frontal plane arm swing. And so if we watch the arms occurring here, we'll pay attention to this elbow and this elbow. And so let's go slow motion, and we can see with that left elbow, she doesn't quite cross the midline, but she is pulling. So there's so much frontal plane arm swing and very little sagittal plane motion. She's really working to decelerate those hips by getting, in my opinion, an excessive thoracic rotation. And so I'd like to see her really work on an arm swing that is more sagittal plane driven and less side to side. So I think she's wasting a lot of energy. The other thing that I think Dave pointed out very interestingly is just noticing that she's landing quite inverted there, which means she's going to have to work very hard to decelerate. And it gives you a hint as to possibly the function of the the posterior tibialis, and possibly a forefoot varus going on here. She's working really hard on this side. She doesn't land nearly as inverted on this foot. And again, whether those are meaningful or not, it's hard to know. You have to clinically relate it. But the beauty of Kcap is we have the picture so we can capture it, measure it, help the patient understand it, and then check it down the road after our interventions.